During the winter campaigns of World War II, soldiers didn't just fight the enemy, they fought the cold. On the Eastern Front, temperatures often plunged below -40 degrees Celsius, and honestly, exposure to that kind of cold could kill a man faster than a bullet. Frostbite became a silent, merciless enemy that crippled entire divisions. But buried deep within wartime field manuals and oral accounts is a forgotten innovation, an improvised grease formula used by soldiers to protect their skin and limbs when boots froze stiff and medical supplies ran out. This wasn't a commercial ointment. It was a battlefield concoction made from whatever fats, oils and waxes could be found. And it worked so well that veterans swore by it decades later. When the cold became deadlier than combat itself. By late 1941, both Axis and Soviet troops were facing conditions they were never trained for. Uniforms froze solid overnight, rifles jammed with ice, and medical tents filled with men whose toes and fingers had turned black. The cold was unrelenting, and supplies of issued anti-frost creams ran out fast. The few ointments available, like lanolin-based salves, were too scarce for frontline use. Soldiers began creating their own versions from leftover cooking grease, gun oil, and animal fat. What they discovered was that these greasy mixtures didn't just keep moisture out, they created a barrier that trapped body heat close to the skin. It was the beginning of what historians now call field grease, a makeshift frostbite defense born entirely from necessity. This method became so widespread that field notes from both German and Soviet archives mention grease application lines before patrols in the cold. Troops would rub the mixture on their faces, ears and hands before heading out. Some divisions even mixed in ash or charcoal dust for added protection, since the darkened layer absorbed more sunlight, providing slight but valuable warmth. The forgotten ingredients behind the World War II anti-frostbite grease. The typical World War II grease formula varied depending on what was available, but a consistent pattern emerged across different armies. The base was always fat, most commonly tallow, rendered from animal tissue. It was thick, slow to melt, and easy to store even in freezing temperatures. To that, soldiers added beeswax or candle wax to give it firmness and create a stronger barrier against moisture. The key component, though, was mineral or gun oil, a leftover lubricant from weapons maintenance. It reduced the stiffness of the mixture and made it easier to spread across exposed skin. Some improvised versions even included charcoal dust or wood ash, not for texture, but for mild antibacterial protection and added heat absorption. Mixed together over a low flame, the result was a heavy, dark grease that resisted freezing. When applied to the skin, it slowed heat loss and blocked frost from forming directly on the surface. In many field accounts, soldiers who applied this mixture regularly avoided the severe blistering and tissue death that plagued those who didn't. The science behind how the formula actually worked is rather fascinating. Frostbite happens when skin tissue freezes, cutting off circulation and oxygen flow. The first stage, frostnip, can start within minutes when skin is exposed to air below freezing. What this grease did was prevent the skin's surface moisture from evaporating. That moisture loss is what speeds up heat loss. By sealing the pores and coating the skin in an oily layer, the grease created a protective film. Think of it as a primitive thermal barrier. The layer of oil and wax prevented rapid cooling through evaporation and convection. At the same time, fats like tallow have high energy density. They absorb and release heat slowly. When rubbed onto the skin, body heat slightly warmed the mixture, and in turn, the mixture helped keep that warmth trapped near the skin's surface. This was the same principle later used in polar expeditions and modern anti-frostbite balms. In fact, the British Army's Cold Weather Manual from 1944 specifically referenced field-made greases as a viable skin protection method, advising soldiers to rub it in until the skin gleams. How you can recreate this historical frostbite defense today? For those interested in experimenting safely with historical methods, this formula is surprisingly simple to replicate with modern ingredients. Start by melting 2 parts animal tallow or coconut oil with 1 part beeswax in a small tin or metal cup. Once melted, add a few teaspoons of mineral oil to make it spreadable. Stir until uniform, then let it cool until it forms a dense, ointment-like consistency. To use, apply a thin layer to exposed skin before going into the cold. This works especially well for outdoor workers, winter hikers, or anyone camping in freezing temperatures. It's completely natural and forms a waterproof layer that lasts for hours. Unlike synthetic creams that can freeze or crack, this blend remains flexible even in extreme cold. Now, for those who prefer plant-based options, olive oil and candelilla wax can actually be used instead of animal fats and beeswax. The principle, you see, remains identical. What you want is to create a seal that locks in body heat while blocking wind and moisture. However, it's really important not to apply it to open wounds or frostbite-damaged skin. Just remember, it's a preventive layer, not a cure. Here's something interesting, the forgotten frontline habit that modern survivalists should really bring back. One of the most fascinating aspects of this World War II grease method was how disciplined soldiers became about its use. Frostbite prevention became part of their daily ritual, just like cleaning weapons or, checking ammunition. In the same way, modern survivalists and preppers could adopt this mindset. Preparation isn't just about what you carry, but also about what you apply and protect. Those who spend time in the cold, whether hunting, hiking or working outdoors, can absolutely benefit from this century-old method. It costs almost nothing to make, doesn't rely on factory ingredients, and can be stored, pretty much indefinitely. More importantly, it's a piece of practical history that proves how human ingenuity thrives under pressure. Why does this World War II grease formula still matter today? Well, this wasn't just another wartime improvisation. It was a quiet innovation that saved thousands of soldiers from amputation and death. It also showed how the simplest natural substances, fat, wax, and oil, could, when applied with understanding, outperform even some of the most advanced cold weather gear. In a world obsessed with modern solutions, this story is, honestly, a reminder that sometimes the most effective technology is already in our hands, just forgotten. For those passionate about real survival history and the methods that kept men alive in impossible conditions, this piece of World War II ingenuity deserves to be remembered, practiced and passed on. If you value learning about forgotten wartime inventions that still hold real-world survival value, make sure to subscribe to In the Beginning. Share this video with others who appreciate the lost practical wisdom of history's toughest soldiers. because the lessons that saved lives then might still save lives now.